Hello, Adam. How are you?
I'm fine.
Oh, I can even hear you. Wow. So I'm back in Norway, and I had an interesting realization building over the last 2 days, which culminated in some thinking on the plane. So let's see. I think it's very much aligned with what you've been talking about, actually. So let's see who will join us. You're a bit early. I saw you log in, so wow, must join Adam. Anyway, how are you doing?
Well, I'm fine. It's interesting what we're doing here. It's so hard to find the shapes around the problem or the work here to see what there are so many interesting ideas and so many tracks to
Yeah,
work on.
yeah, I agree. And hang on, something funny happened here with the display. Yeah, there is. You're obviously quite familiar with Ted Nelson's work, right? So where I am now in Norway at our summer place, he's actually stayed for a while before, a long time ago, and we had some interesting discussions, of course. But what I realized over the last few days is how advanced he is in his thinking. If you don't mind, I'll just read a quick extract. Can I do that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Hey, Mr. Mark. If so, I'm just going to read a quick bit. I'm going to skim through it because I don't want to bore you guys to tears. But I think it's very relevant to specifically you two. So this is probably going to be my contribution to the Future of Text book as an introduction this time, and kind of a preface for my thesis. Anyway, the internal world of our brains developed to fit the accessible external world of available affordances. Just saw a typo there. I won't stop for any other typos. As a London taxi driver's hippocampus develops differently as they learn the knowledge, the Pacific Islander lays down in their mock canoe to learn the patterns of the stars. The musician learns an instrument, and the ballet dancer basketball player learns how their bodies move in their environment. And competitive computer games player becomes intimate with a map, weapons, and tactics. Their brain will not develop the same as the painter, business entrepreneur, or anyone else who focuses on specific aspects of their brain to develop. So then I go into a bit of history of how humans have changed into different environments. But then I realized this thing, and this is where it's really relevant with you guys. What's also happening to our brain, that is what's also happening to our brains right now. As we move further into exceptionally interactive digital environments, is that our brains are changing since the manner in which we can access information changes. Nicholas Carr wrote about what he calls the shallows, which became a very successful book since it feeds into the ever-rolling sentiment from elders to youth that the youth is simply not learning deeply and properly enough. And yeah, I'm going to stop reading and just mention it. I see Raphael's coming in. Hi, Raphael.
Hello.
I think I can summarize what I was reading much faster than having you guys listen to a speech here. But it's just been a couple of days of realization coming together with something. The first thing is whatever is in your environment, you will adapt your brain to fit, whether you're going to be a this person or that person. And as humans have been in different environments, we've had to adapt to different, even though the cells are roughly the same when we're born. Someone who works on a farm in a jungle with a computer or an airplane obviously will have different means through which they connect with the world, right? So that's fair enough. So then I go in this screed that I usually do of, oh, digital is different, blah, blah, blah. It's more about small pieces rather than big blocks. And that's where I come to think of Ted Nelson, because Ted was obviously hypertext, but he would write, as you probably know, lots of little notes, Post-its everywhere. When he stayed here with us, once there was something wrong with it, something in the fridge, he would put a note on the fridge saying, sorry, blah, blah, blah. Notes absolutely everywhere. Crazy man, in a sense. But I think he lives more in the future because digital affordances are about connections rather than chunking. When you can access a document that is anywhere in the world with the same speed you can open a document on your computer, connections are clearly more important in a way. So that was nice. But when I was about to land here in Norway today, I realized the second bit, and I really, really want to know what you guys think about that. And that is, if you look at the history of our species, it's only been, most of, look at a timeline like this. There's been this tiny sliver of books becoming really thick things, right? Long documents. And that sliver has only been for a small part of the population who really are either scholars or have to prove something in education. And even innovations in pre-digital in that field has been about random access, about chunking. What is the codex? Codex is, of course, a way you can access a page rather than just a papyrus roll document. So what I'm realizing is that what digital stuffs is doing by making us watch TikTok, making us use Twitter, making us write shorter paragraphs, is putting us back to where we used to be more. It is freeing us from the artificial construct of reams of gray text. So it is not a new thing, it is releasing something inherent in us from before. Cool, right? Is that obvious or provocative, or do you disagree? Or let me just drink water while you reply.
I'm still digesting it.
It is really, really, Mark and I, being close friends, argue over these things quite a bit. And we have some similar brains and some very different brains. And I come from an artistic background. I've got a degree from Chelsea School of Art. I can write an article. That's not a problem. I'm quite eloquent. I know I'm not a horrible person. But to thread together so many different things in a huge document, I feel that is more of a hazing ritual for academia than it is a real test and proof of knowledge and innovation, which I think Mark agrees with. But yeah, Mark has really put in the hours to be able to beat this bullshit.
I don't. Yes, I mean, like so many things in life, there is a place for linear text if it has a linear story to tell and a narrative that holds together. The interesting thing about the random access thing is, as you were describing things, yeah, but it's like, and it's not necessarily a thing of sort of scholarly erudition. You go into an old-fashioned record shop, and the person probably didn't look at more than comics, but could walk you through hundreds and hundreds of things, put their hand on a vinyl, pull out. So that's another, it's addressability, it's random access, and we're quite good at this. And I'm not sure it's necessarily a cold dead hand. If there is a cold dead hand in the sort of tech side, it's more actually in the sort of over veneration of outlines and linear narrative. So you look at all the alternative stuff. You look at the hypertext, the linear, the choose your own adventure books. You look at hypertext literature. The one thing is innately not. In fact, it's working hard to not be deliberately linear. And although books play around with all sorts of sort of silly things at the moment, like putting a chapter heading in the middle of what is clearly a run of text because it just looks new and cool. They normally, and you may have 2 or 3 intertwined narratives and things, but they're broadly linear, and they are not bad for that. But the thing that has, I think, been lost in the weeds slightly is this ability to just jump across things that aren't, or other, instead of running backwards and forwards along the narrative, to jump to the relevant thing, be it in that narrative or in some other source altogether. Yeah. And in that sense, I think, and that's very much, in Ted's line of thinking, and others before them, if we choose to look.
I'm not arguing against linear at all. Linear is very, very important. An argument has to be linear. But I am arguing against these huge, long documents because also, TikTok is interesting, partly because if you want to learn something on a YouTube video, because YouTube is quite traditional, there's the introduction, there's the please subscribe, there's a lot of waffle. The reason there's a lot of waffle is a YouTube creator doesn't make mid-roll ad money if it's not longer than 8 minutes, if it's shorter than 8 minutes, right? And also, you know, when you read a newspaper article, you can skip the first paragraph because it's just some individual person to add color. The news is further down. Right. So I'm saying this kind of padding is what's bizarre. And something like TikTok and Twitter, they get rid of the paddings. Like, here's the thing I got to say. So I'm not saying we can change academia from day one, but I think just as the call was starting, Adam was wondering how we can kind of drill down to what to actually build. And it does seem like, you know, convenient ways to connect to make a linear assertion is pretty close to what we're talking about. Here's the thing I'm saying, but if you need to know more, here it is, right?
I like the thoughts on Twitter, and I did use TikTok for about a week after you mentioned.
That is actually more than enough.
And I did not like it, but I felt like it was like a micro version of YouTube, because things are so fast. You watch the videos, they're like 30 seconds long or even less, and it's just like one after the another and the one after another, and then the algorithm keeps adjusting based on your likes. I looked for some people that I already liked on other networks, and they had their TikTok channels, but I just didn't like the medium. What I do like is what you mentioned. There's no fluff. It's mostly content, right? It doesn't matter if it's bad content, but it's the content part. There's no fluff like before or after, and I find that interesting. And I also Twitter has that as well. But I think
sorry, it's so hard to. I'm going to show you a filter, and as I'm listening to you, I'm having your video on here, and it's just making you look ridiculous. There is a point coming, but excuse me for laughing while you're talking.
That's fine. But what I think is more interesting is the modularization of content. Because if you take the long YouTube video and you split it into these modules, and you take the content part, then that's the part you want to watch. And that last update that they put on YouTube to have chapters is part of that. There's pros and cons to having chapters. You can jump directly to the chapter you want to watch because that's the most important part. And that's also the hardest part in video. If you want to find something in the video, you have to keep jumping, around the time code to stumble upon it. And adding chapters to video is like having book chapters, but for video format. And it is linear, but you get it, you get it. What are you doing with my face?
I'm trying to get you here, but it's not working. But I'm just going to make the point. I saw this absolutely incredible thing on TikTok where it can make you pout or it can make you smile. Completely photorealistic.
Yeah.
Right? Why do they have that stuff? And we even have problems doing parsing on basic stuff. Anyway, that's all. That's the only point. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're talking about. Hi, Peter.
The last point is, I don't know if you guys experienced this. I'm sure you have in books. Whenever you have long chapters, you tend to take longer to finish them.
Yeah.
But when a book has a bunch of short chapters, you end up in that point where I'm just going to read one more chapter because it's only 3 or 4 extra pages, and then you finish that chapter a little faster because it's structured in smaller chapters. I tend to prefer books like that. It doesn't matter if like the main content is 50 chapters long. If the chapters are smaller, there's sections between them. I feel like I go through it a lot faster than I would, this chapter has 300 pages, and then it takes a long time for you to digest that and know that you've reached the threshold. So what I started to do, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. I do this on all my books. The black parts are the chapters, like the main chapters, and then the red line is the glossary, or when the book actually ends. Because sometimes you have books that have like 200 pages of glossaries, and it seems a little daunting. I always finish the books, but when I structure it like this, I know that, the first chapter is only this bit. It's only like this little part right here. And it makes it so I read books a lot faster because I can get more information from the structure of the book by just looking at, the page spine.
That's interesting.
I like that. I think that's, I mean, that, and in a sense, That, well, I suspect that's a printing affordance that could easily be done. People don't choose. But you're right. I mean, you know, certainly in you know, some, especially in some academic books, yeah, a good third of the book may well be reference material. Well,
Yeah.
it's about like going to, you know, you've got some book to read on the airplane or something in something like a Kindle. And you think, oh, good, I've got another sort of 15 minutes of reading. And then you suddenly find it's the, you know, the history of the fantasy world or whatever you're reading. There'll be basically a whole lot of stuff at the back, which is almost like the footnotes. And but the progress bar doesn't know that, because
Yes.
you would think if I'm reading a novel, the end is the last chapter, not all the bit at the end.
Yes. I mean, I'm a big fan of vertical scrolling on ebooks, but there's that problem of, you know, how do I know where I'm at? I feel like for example, pages don't work. You know, a progress bar works better than page numbers in digital format, or some other kind of, you know, infographic related progress navigation thing. But pages simply don't make sense in digital format.
I mean, scrolling's really nice for, oh my God, the characters monologuing. So we don't need to read that. There's absolutely nothing of interest. Let's go 10 pages on and get on with the story.
I'm not sure if I like pages or not, but what I do not like is when you cannot scroll a full page at a time. Because what I've noticed myself and others do is you only read the top third of the screen.
On what format? Is this on a phone or on a small screen? Or?
Hardly anyone I've seen, and I did actually study this a long time ago. If you are on a scrolling display like a web page, people will read the top, maybe lower down on a laptop, but on this one they will stay on top.
I agree, and I don't mind staying on top. It's I just keep scrolling slowly by slowly, and it's always on top because that's the most comfortable area of the screen to read.
Well, that goes back to your opening. And what I'm hearing described there as an adaptation to, not necessarily limitation, but an adaptation to the presentation, you know, because as Raphael's just said, so this is the comfortable way of interacting with this mode of display. You know, if it was sort of papyrus, you'd probably have it on big windy scrolls and you'd be doing sideways scrolling. So it's partly an interaction with the type of medium. I certainly know that when I first started using a Kindle, I was seriously weirded out that I couldn't essentially turn a page, and I kept wanting to, you know, I wanted to put the size bigger to make it easier to read, but I wanted to know what page I was on until I realized it didn't matter. I'm not reading a paged book.
Yeah.
And now I actually normally I have the bottom set on how many minutes left in the chapter, because it's often I read the Kindle most when I'm, you know.
Let me see if I can.
Will I start another chapter or not?
I think I can share my screen to show. Let me start broadcast, Zoom. So I talked about this app a couple of times. It's called Marvin. And if I put it vertically, if I put it vertically, let me see if it changes.
What device are you on? Oh yeah, you're on a Mac. Okay, I can see it now.
No, I'm in an iPad.
Oh.
Okay.
So can you see the text?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I reach like you can see the scroll bar on the right side. When I reach the bottom of this area, there's a little snap. And then this little snap tells me, you know, that I'm finished.
That's nice. Yeah.
And then release for part one. And then I go into part one and then release for, you know, the text. And then I go reading. And I feel like the progress bar here on the right side is better than having any kind of page number. It doesn't tell me the page number. It tells me 5% overall or 6% in this chapter. So there's a little progress for this chapter and for overall.
And in fact, as you do that, it will be, I can imagine in my mind's eye that, you know, as you showed us where you've marked the spine or the end, the page margins of a book, you could actually have markers effectively in that same gutter.
Yes.
Of primary divides, such as, you know, the back matter and chapters. That's quite interesting.
If I turn on publisher's layout, it's how the ebook comes from the publisher, right? And it's usually horrible. So then I always turn publisher's layout off, and then I can adjust, the indentation of the first paragraph, the paragraph spacing, the line spacing, all those things. And I find this Marvin program amazing to read ebooks. But yeah, I just wanted to show how this one handles progress and pages.
That's nice.
That is nice. So back to kind of the topic-ish of today, Adam's question. I guess we agree that there is a holy grail of how to work with pieces and to be able to assemble them in an easy way that we can then disassemble. Adam, I really want to hear your opinion on what you want to do today.
Hold on.
You're muted, Adam.
You're lagging also a little bit. You're still muted. I think you're saying some bad words right now.
Why?
Adam, just ignore that it's muted. Just say yes at random intervals. Come on, guys. You know how it works.
I agree, Adam. That's quite interesting.
Yes. If anyone who's standing next to a muted speaker will kindly report it now, yes. While Adam's unmuting it, just quickly throw in something. I almost thought I get it done by now. I'll be sending. I'll send out Adam's unmuting. Almost thought I get it done for to everyone, but I'll say mainly for Adam and Peter, which is all of my citation data set. So that's all 1,400 items odd, including the ones that were never cited. And I put in some extra metadata for Adam so that you can quickly just grab the bits that have at least one citation to put you back to the other set. I just thought it made it will be interesting from the visualization aspect when we want to start looking at finding other things, because there will be information in there that's not necessarily cited. And one of the things we've been talking about is this ability to go across things. Anyway, so to come, sorry, I hope to have it ready. Sorry, Adam, back to you.
Yeah, some computer issues over here. My setup here is so complex right now with screens in different combinations. So now they are out of sync between themselves. So it's kind of insane. Okay, so two questions. First, a quick comment on the previous question, what Raphael and Mark commented on, and there are several types of text as well. So we really have to be mindful that some things really need to have the framing preserved much more, and I think that is not really solved as well, because a page as the printed page, then the reader gets that page exactly in that format. But on screens, you're never sure with zoom level or how it's viewed, or you're seldom sure about that. So there is something about exploring the actual pages or the frames a bit more. Even though you don't want the endless scrolls, I think it would still be useful to experiment with different page lengths or frames to have to make the chunks smaller, in the spirit of the discussion here. To have what is a two-page frame, so to say. When you have content that spans about 2 pages of regular printed paper, how do you present that in a good way, either as a scroll or side by side? And also, how do you put the chapters next to each other? Should it be side by side? Right now, text as we use it it's going left to right or right to left, and then continues on the next row and next row and next row. But it would be interesting to experiment more with the actual layouts of the pages or the longer chunks. How do you put them next to each other? So in what you put beside each other in the horizontal view, would that be chapters? Will there be, or should it be going from overview to main text to detailed view or references and so on, left to right? That is very interesting to me too. Yeah, that was the first thing. Maybe you have any thoughts about that?
I have plenty of thoughts, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Mark?
Yeah, no, I was thinking, because it is interesting. I mean, and listening for a number of things being described, indeed, and Barra fell afterwards, without any intent, describes a lot of that's delivered actually behavior, which is driven by commercialization. Whereas sometimes the preamble maybe into a news article is partly a bit like a conversation. Not many people like to plunge straight into the meat of the conversation. They want a little orientation. To someone who knows what they're doing, it's the opposite way around. You want it as fast and as concise. So partly it's a thing that's one size fits all, and it allows, it allows a sort of an in and an out. So it's hard to generalize. But the thing that I found myself reflecting on, just as Anne was speaking, was in terms of the change of the digital age, is are we thinking about leaving aside even the tools? Are we thinking differently about how we write for the digital age? In other words, if I know I'm going to write, when I write, I use the affordances I have, and I'm sort of still probably thinking paper just because that's the norm. If I sat down to write a hypertext, how would I be thinking in my mind? Would I write? Would the flow of the words, the structure of the paragraphs, be different? Because this goes back to the addressability thing. If something needs to be 5 sentences long to understood, chunking it into sort of 2.5 sentence paragraphs or chunks isn't going to help much. And I don't know the answer here. It just occurs to me that alongside all the clever thinking that Freud's put into author in terms of addressability within the document, I'm just thinking, I don't know that I've seen any sort of one writing on how these new digital methods of remediation, I guess you might say, can and should affect how we write. So, and I'm inherently at this point not talking about people who are deliberately trying to write things that are different. So people who are writing alternative poetry or something, that's a whole different ballgame. But just terms of,
the basic, Mark, is you have undo, and that opens up a different freedom. Are you talking about the basic affordances or future affordances?
Oh, no, it's also it's actually thinking about, if I go and write things. I mean, as Adam rightly said, some things need to be in order. I mean, say leave aircraft before inflating life jacket. That's probably a sequence you don't want to muck around with. But going back to this thing of being able to bounce around in very small areas of addressability, ought, in my mind, to start us thinking about, well, if that is the case, then I'm expecting someone not, however I produce it, that it's likely that the one order it may not be consumed in is the order that I wrote it. I have a sense of it from writing ATB Ref, which Peter will know, one or two people, which is my sort of outboard documentation for Tinderbox, because I tried to make it heavily interlinked, which meant I had to write in small articles primarily so that they were addressable, because it's a static system and I couldn't do any sort of fancy modern stuff. But that's sort of interesting, and I'm just beginning to wonder if there's more to be explored there, and if anyone's actually seen anyone writing on this topic. I see Peter's got his hand up.
Yeah, my biggest dilemma right now is just trying to figure out what I'm going to do in terms of page layout. I'm doing a major redesign of my website, and I have the problem of some semi-large articles that want to be roughly around like a screen and a half's worth of content. So the question is, do I try to adapt that and do 2 columns side by side, or instead do I pin it to 65 character paragraph width and then stretch the character out to expand and take the available space? Or should I try to shrink the size, increase the number of characters a little bit to force everything to fit on the one screen? I'm not sure if there's a good way to do it, but intuitively, it seems like this is analogous to Newf's line breaking problem. If I could figure out a way that we could define what's a representation of badness, then thinking about all the possible layouts, and then have the system automatically figure out what's the least bad approach to putting that content in there. Ideally, I'd like everything to be visible at once without need to scroll. But if that's not doable, I want to maximize the legibility without having unsightly white space on the sides. Then the reader's going to look and say, well, gee, there's a column here. Why didn't he give me 2 columns? Because I have these huge monster gutters and I still have to scroll, which is annoying. So it's sort of a question of how much can I contract the text, try to keep it at one screen, or expand the text. So instead of it being a horizontal expansion, it's like an overall area expansion factor when trying to do the screen layout. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go yet, but
It really depends on the
That's where my
target
intuition-
user screen size, Peter, I think. That's a huge factor. You know, I think Squarespace that I use for only this site, it does a good reflowing. I know it's not exactly rocket science reflowing, but I think to start going into multiple columns for something like the web is quite ambitious.
There's an
Still,
other-
yeah.
Adam, sorry.
Yeah, it's still we have most of our screens are horizontal or wider than they are tall. We usually keep them that way. So, and I think the text hasn't really done that transition too well. Where you have to, on an iPad you can turn the iPad, but most computer screens and are wide. So I think there is room to lay out things more horizontally as well.
I agree, and I totally agree on it's still not solved. When we have, a 2-page spread and we want to show it in 1 page, it always, I even took a screenshot here, but I can't show it right now. So two ideas for that would be a way for you to connect these pages together. For example, a lot of times when you open a PDF on the computer, depending on how the pages are structured, you end up with the spreads, one on the right side and the other on the left side. So then they're never together. So then you have to go and delete 1 page in the PDF so that the structure is correct. So you can see, the spread side by side. If we had, either a way to, PDF has so many issues, huh, guys? to connect these pages, and
It's trying to be paper.
yeah. But and then the other issue, sorry, and then the other issue is for EPUBs. The structure is always wrong as well. When you have like a well laid out book, and on the printed page you can see how it was supposed to look. On ebooks, it's just gibberish.
Oh.
See, I'm only okay with going to a 2-column layout if it ensures that there's no vertical scroll on the device that's being looked at on. Otherwise, I want to stick to 1 column because I don't want to get to the situation where I'm like reading an ACM paper. It's a 2-column layout. I have it on my screen. I wind up scrolling the left column down in order to read it, then having to scroll back up to the top of the page to tackle the right column and then scroll down there. That's an incredibly annoying reading mode. In fact, that was the main reason why I went off and got the good high resolution iPad, so I could just see those 2-column spread ACM papers on the pad all at once without having to deal with the scrolling that I had on earlier devices. So it's really critical if you're in a 2-column mode to not have to do any vertical scrolling for that page. And again, it can be
Yep.
paginated over more than one page, but you want to make sure that what's visible and deemed one page isn't going to require any vertical scroll if there's more than one column. Otherwise, therein lies the route to madness.
I think we can go through many rabbit holes, and many types of responsive CSS and HTML5 design things come into this, but it's also some of the affordances are interesting. Like, I got the new iPad. We're going to put Reader on there. So far, I've hardly used it. I feel like it was a waste of money. It's awful. But the surprise to me was that I don't want to read too much in the portrait mode on the iPad because it's actually kind of heavy to hold. So what I do is actually turn it in the way that we're looking at my shared screen here. And then we have
Mhm.
2-column layout, which I haven't asked Jacob to do yet because he's updating Visual Meta to 1.1, which is turning out to be hell, but he's doing it, so I'm grateful. And then I'm back to, when I read on the iPad, I actually would like to have a stand if I don't sit comfortably and it's the right size. Oh, I'm back on my laptop. So for reading purposes, and also, when you look at this and you compare it with this, I would say this is more readable than this. However, this can be more readily interacted with to change what it is, right? This kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just prefer to have a lot of white space on the right and left side and center the content like you have it on, like that. I would just increase the blank space on the sides.
Because that's what
Yeah.
some of the early sort of distraction-free sort of typing things, so was it Hog Bay and things like that, was, and you had your, and it was done so that your writing line stayed in the middle of the screen. And the whole idea was it was sort of as close as you could get to really not using a computer. But then it's not sort of tangent. It's something again that came up listening to something Adam was saying that sparked my thoughts. And when you were saying 2 pages or something, is that with work type writing, so especially academic writing, when you're reading something like, so some of this basically is heavily referenced, because I know we talked in the past about this ability to say find a reference and know what it is, and I know that, so for instance, now working on popovers, and that's a really nice idea, but it might be that actually what you want to be is you want to be looking at this page in chapter 2, but actually have sort of in your peripheral vision next to it the bit that you remember reading in chapter 5, when you were browsing through earlier, because effectively you're tweaking those antennae that are doing this non-sequential linking. And I sort of do it with 2 screens, and I put one document up, and occasionally I've actually had the same document open in different things, just so I can read different pages in context. Which is about as close as you get to the kind of thing where you sit where your fingers sort of jammed in the side of the book and flicking backwards and forwards. But I think there's also some interesting exploration to be done there, which is slightly different to actually changing the current reading space and the reflow of text. But it's more about what contingent information within. I'm not thinking about, another website or something, because you can have more screens or more space to do that. But within a given piece that you have, be it a long article or a short one, that you might want to look, you might be reading one bit, but you would like to have in sort of close context another part of it. And again, I don't know the answer there, but I think there's an interesting area of exploration there.
Yeah, Adam, I think you haven't commented on this yet.
Maybe the margins, if we combine the white space, generous white space, with actually opening up both comments, other people's comments perhaps, and opening up miniature other PDFs references on the side, just a small, so you put things there, so it's a dynamic place when reading, and maybe they even stay in that, so it's you either open things or you close them, but they stay there for the next reading as well, so it's kind of a more permanent space where you put a note there and it will stay there until you take it away. And if you put a paper there, open up a paper, it will stay there. That could be a way. somewhat related is the idea either when you have a long or big document with lots of text and other media as well, do you want to have it as a big map that you move around on, a big kind of a fixed map, but that where you scroll a lot, or is it better to zoom into to things? That's kind of the two ways of navigating a map as well. Either you move the paper, or you move closer in and out. You move back away to get the overview. And because the cool thing about technology is that you can have the really zoomable interfaces. With paper, the printer resolution is not there, but actually you can put in a PDF or other things. You can have a perfect copy of an image. You just enlarge it and it's a perfect copy. You can we could possibly have the full text as well, small comment that you zoom into and have a zoomable text interface. That is something that I think a lot of about how to actually do the overview. One thing, if everything is hypertext and wiki-like, where everything is replaced, it's easier because then you just jump around. But if you want to, and that is really what I want to do. I want to preserve some sense of typography and graphic design, and to make it unique. Right now we just pour our text into a form made by programmers and designers, and it usually nowadays is pretty readable. It's good. You can, it's readable, but it's not memorable. I don't remember the actual text pages. It's just page after page after page. So people have to be so damn good with the language that it opens up an image in your head. But if they are not, then it's lost immediately to me. So I really think we should nail down the graphical side to it, and it could be zoomable, or it could be a big page map that frames all the sub pages or subframes. But there is something to it, which PDF is not really solving yet.
Oh, I agree. Peter, just quickly before you, I just wanted to say, let's not forget the difference between reading and writing being very, very different activities in terms of interaction. Just, something I wanted to highlight. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, expanding on the zoomable thought, an interesting interface might be sort of inspired by Polly's paper from way back when in the 90s. If you increased the leading between lines and then put in an interlinear gloss, only that interlinear gloss could itself be a window into another part of the document. So imagine we start zooming in, the main text gets bigger and fades out as it expands. The interlinear spacing increases, and then in that space, we see a very small snapshot of like a thumbnail view of the page that we're referring to, and you could smoothly zoom all the way in until that was your full scale page. And then even in that, you could keep zooming, see a note there, and increase on another part of that, and that would become a tiny little thumbnail that would turn into a window, fully expanding into another piece of the document. So it would actually be sort of a 3D navigation through a series of zoom spaces that are stacked behind one another in terms of depth of the linkage.
My immediate feeling about that kind of interaction is researchers who work on that make assumptions that the document is very important and people will work for quite a long time to become intimate with different aspects of it. And, that's great if you're talking about something like, reading the Federalist Papers or something hugely important to history.
Or the tax code, it could be very useful. Lawyers might love something like that where you could zoom through a statute.
Yeah, but I mean, just, there are different ways to zoom. We can zoom by levels as we have here. That's quite easy. We can also fold by criteria, zooming or folding. So a simple way is to do only show defined concept. This is the new document, so I don't have many. But here I can see which of my own concepts I've used where. Right.
Oh,
and
nice.
If we're talking about digital, the Command F is another way of doing it. But we should really try to think of So okay, here I'm writing about Ted Nelson, right? We probably want to develop some way where, without doing something as dramatic as this, which changes everything, maybe I can find out a different way of relations to Ted Nelson in the text. Because one of the problems we have when writing a large piece of work is, oh, have I written about this already?
Mm.
Or how can I make it flow to some other part, right? So the whole criteria things where we, in a sense, fold by multiple dimensions.
Well, that sort of makes me, it goes back to this thing of I wonder if we need to, as well as our tools, we actually need to sort of retool our brains to think about writing. Now we have these affordances, or the potential of these affordances, is sort of writing in a way so that, yes, you can sort of think, okay, look, I need to mention this guy, Ted or somebody several times, and I can see where they are. It just seems to me a natural echo of your opening to today's sort of conversation of saying, well, people adapt to these skills. And I sense one area where we're still in a very loose transitional thing is writing with intent for media that doesn't necessarily have a fixed state. And I don't mean by this someone who's just dashing off an article for a political blog or something, because that's just digital chip paper. That's not to be disrespecting the content of the writing, but it's sort of rapid consumable. It's not something done with more intent. And I did think a couple of things I had on the thing. I think it was Adam mentioned the sort of the idea that if you had lots of white space, you could put things in it. And it did make me think of Freud's sort of notion of having, well, if you know what the documents are around you have, and they have their visual meta and things, that sort of automatically speaks to that in a sense, yeah, these things are actually showing up because you know what they are. They describe what they are. And if you have them close to you, you can see them, because our visual memory is quite good, I think. I mean, I often find, I remember a place in a book I couldn't, if you asked me what's on page 462, I couldn't tell you, but I can flick through the book and say, that's the place where I found this thing. Maybe that's not everyone, but it's certainly quite strong for me.
Well, let me ask some questions then.
Yeah.
So this example about writing about Ted Nelson, one of the problems we have with the web and normal PDFs is that if a link is embedded, a normal word blue underlined, it gets lost very, very easily, it gets deleted. So what we have with Visual Meta, if you have a endnote, it actually puts it at the end as an endnote, so it's still in the document, right? The reference may not be parsed, whatever. But so I'm writing about this guy, and he obviously has many reasons to appear in a document about hypertext. So what do you feel, just to have a real clear example, what could be aids to me as a user to better organize my thoughts around Ted Nelson? Or maybe how can it help a reader when they get to Ted Nelson understand more about Ted Nelson?
Okay, we could take a multi-level indexing approach and also use that to build an index. So if I had Ted Nelson, I could have Ted Nelson on the history of hypertext, Ted Nelson on addressability could be the second level, on tumblers could be the next one, but just sort of like give the context before giving the content. So you get like a little menu of context attached to the entry before you get and see what was related to that particular context. Also coming to mind was, there was an old Finder alternative program way back in like the System 7 era that would basically give you a view of one directory, and if you selected a subdirectory, it would slide the first directory off to the left and then enter the second directory to its right. And it would just keep sliding one pane off to the side with each level of navigation. And of course, you could always just do a real long horizontal scroll to get back to your original context. And something like that might help manage dealing with nested stacking.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just wanted to show you guys that this thing that I'm very passionate about, glossary. It just appears as text at the end of the document.
Yeah.
Right. But that does mean that you should be able to write an entire document that is readable purely from a glossary perspective.
Well, one other random thought: is anyone doing anything interesting in game user interfaces that we might be able to leverage? Because it seems like there's more experimentation when people are designing. Here's what the computer system of these space aliens looks like on their starship cockpit display.
Mm.
I don't think so, in the sense of I think the interfaces, the fake interfaces in gaming is awful. However, I think the interfaces for the gamer to run the game is getting very, very good. Those being two very different things. What I mean is, for instance, in Battlefield 2042, developed in this weird country, Sweden, coming out very soon, just listen to the sounds, right? So if you shoot someone, if you kill them, injure them, or miss, there's actually different sounds. And the actual,
I love it.
yeah, it's something that you don't notice, but because
I'm not dead yet.
yeah, but also the crosshairs have different shapes and colors depending on what you're doing. Right. So there's a lot of great stuff we can learn from that. But kind of the fake interfaces all tend to be Star Trek, interface.
A thought, something that sort of bounced into my head as you were talking about links and, if they get lost in things, is the fact that the thing I never got my head around with sort of Ted was I got the intertwingle part, but at some point you have to know why you made that thing in the first place, and that was always sort of less well defined. It's easy to see the links that are being created once you've created these interrelations, and the reason I say that is well, you don't know at outset. Consuming other people's links is sort of clearer because someone has drawn the distinction for you. And so you go back to the authoring end. I mean, one aspect of what you mentioned in terms of how do you find out about someone is also an aspect the author may need, not the reader, but to help the author is for them to be able to define effectively, you might say, you might refer to Ted as the person who coined the word hypertext. That's a rather arch phrase, but you might have a shorter one. But the point is, every time you use that phrase, you would know you were referring to Ted Nelson, but his name would not be in it. So a simple text search can't find that. So again, this goes back to, if you want to have these affordances in use, you, the author, will actually have to start to think about effectively ponying up some extra metadata. So, help the machine to help you. And there's an interesting, so that becomes another learned experience we need to look at, another form of training. Because I definitely think it helps us. I just don't believe that, anytime real soon, the computer is just going to guess that for us. We understand that. We understand that cross-link. So we need to help surface that for our writing selves. And another thing I find is, and this is just a journal. This is not a book recommendation. This happens to be, well, it's ECHT 90, but I find this quite nice for reading the papers therein. What I really want, more than paying for something twice over, would be the ability to read this and almost have some augmented tool alongside that's almost doing a read along digitally. So when I wanted to annotate it, I could annotate it in a digital context and and have all the affordances offered. It's just because I still think reading on screen for any sort of deliberate consumption is generally less pleasurable than a book. Not for novels and stuff, but for something where I'm actually trying to understand something, and probably something at that point, something at the point where I don't fully understand it. So that's another interesting mixed mode for people who are thinking about VR and AR or something. Is that you're in a sense, the machine's reading along with you. And so you get to the point where you want to write something down. And I'm a terribly bad typist, and I have appalling handwriting. And it'd be lovely if I could basically just almost speak in annotation, and that could be captured where I was. Throw that out as an idea to people more capable than myself. Adam.
So perhaps when you're reading a document, most likely, or maybe you will want to escape that document, but you should stay with this good document for some reason, I guess. So it's not good if you leave down a rabbit hole with different sources at that point, possibly. It could be, but let's say you want to read the document and understand it. So when you come across either an external reference or a glossary entry, and depending on if you're in a computer, maybe you hover over the link, the Ted Nelson link, or on iPad you click on it, and first it opens a small pop-up, like they do the previews on Wikipedia. When you hover over a link, you get a small snippet of I really like that interaction. The problem is that then you click further and then you're down the rabbit hole. But for reading a book, maybe you could collect some of those. So it opens up a small card, parks it in the margin, in the generous white spaces where you have your comments and things, your own notes. But you can also park different cards there. And perhaps even from there, you could drag or collect those cards, some for later. If it's a reference paper, it opens up a small preview of it. But and then you could put it on a list or in a space or in a bucket somewhere to perhaps read later, but at least you collected it.
Well, indeed, in the car. Sorry, great.
No, I was just going to say that makes me think of that famous cartoon, professor at the front of the class, lots of equations, and the middle it says, magic happens here. In a good way, as in this is where we need to focus on, as in, as Marcus said, and I think we all agree on, the piling is one thing, but what do you actually do with that? Because now even, just do a quick share screen here. Once you define something, you can choose a reference. These are only the references used in this document. Already almost useless. So with the kind of work that you've been doing, Adam, I'm excited to see how we can get to the magic happens here part for, we put all kinds of things in. Of course, there are many ways to do that. Visual meta is one, there are many others. But once you have it, how does it not just become a bucket?
I think the text buckets, the long lists are one of the problems. I rather have a miniature of the document or something that is more unique than just line after line and 50. You get really scared of a list with 50 different texts. It becomes a to-do list and not a more pleasurable exploration. So I think putting the actual document in there in the margin would be one thing. So if you have it or you can get it from ACM, it should have a small miniature of it, or an image of Ted Nelson and your 3 definitions of what is up to or has been up to and so on. So
how about also we use the layout possibilities. So let's say you go into, I want to find citations. Let's just start with only that, right? So where am I? Okay, I was going to illustrate. So let's say that there's a pile of books here. Your books will always be here. Web will always be here. PDFs will always be here, and I don't know, whatever here, right? So if you type a search in the middle, items from those different piles that have that will come closer, for instance. So you're at Ted Nelson, and it's like, oh, no, I'm not actually interested in the PDF. So you kind of shove it back or you move it around. So you get this magnetic layout based on criteria, but you learn what the different corners or sides, whatever, mean, right? And then, of course, you can have this. You can have older documents are smaller.
Mhm.
Would
We think
that
a
be
lot.
for?
We think about those navigations a lot in our interface, Fred, because you were mentioning the corners, and we think about it as a funnel actually. So whenever you select something, you funnel the huge amounts of information that you have, and then you have an overview of what is actually there. And for the z-axis going back, it works just like Time Machine. So you can see older documents on the back, and you can see all of the updated changes in the front.
Can we get permission from ACM to automatically scrape their database for our experimental user interfaces?
Well, it's not impossible because it's very likely.
I know we can do it, but I'm worried about the contract stipulations and whether they have any automatic detecting tools that are going to say, this digital library account just requested more than N documents within a certain window of time. I'm going to trigger a security alert.
Yes, they do.
And shut them down.
I kept getting kicked out of the library for reading the stuff I was paying to read.
But Peter, we've done a successful pilot, and we are in talks to do the Web Science conference next year. So they're definitely in dialogue with us. So I think it's good that you bring that up again, because Adam, if you want to work on something like I just described, not like that at all, but something rich like that, completely different from before, I think they would, if we use the data set Mark already has given us, that would be another reason for them to say, gosh darn, this is something we need to show off. Don't forget,
Right,
next
we want to be
month's,
able.
sorry, Peter, just going to say, don't forget, next month's ACM Communications article by Vint is about this.
When does that drop? Just so we, if there is, that implies this. Sorry, I didn't mean to butt in on Peter. I just want thinking there's an interesting date then, in terms of if we have something that's almost out there, even if rough. Just so, oh, by the way, pertinent to Vint's article is this.
I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't implying you would, but it might be interesting. Dig up.
I don't actually know when it comes.
I mean, one thing is, and when we get to a point in Mark's core data set, when it references something in the digital library from a different conference series that we didn't already do, it'd be nice to be able to just automatically reach out and pull that data in to be able to work with it.
Absolutely. And that was that was sort of part of the cynical thing in the back of my mind, is because part of the hope was people will get to this point. So, oh crap, I can't color outside this thing. Well, no, because if the information is there, but for instance, if the information was there in a machine readable form, and ironically, places like ACM, IEEE ought to be all over this, and not even the people who do linked data. It's funny, they have some linked data about linked data. What they don't have is any linked data. It's just sort of ridiculous, really.
But what do we actually want to do then, guys? Do we want to pile more work on Adam and we all design it together? Or do we want to go in a different direction? Or because these discussions are amazingly exciting, and obviously we all make such an effort to be here consistently. But if we're going to do something, we need to decide on some of the parameters, to start with Adam's opening sentence.
I'm gonna have to go. I have another meeting right now at 1.
Okay. Look forward to
Take care,
seeing
everyone.
you later in the week. Ping me if you want to talk before Friday.
I will.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I mean, I'm for my part, the one thing I'm sort of on top, I'm just busy recutting some data, and I'm happy to go on doing stuff with that to provide a substrate for others to build off. It may not be the sexy part of it, but I think the lesson I learned, when I finally, after 2 years, found someone, thanks Adam, who actually said, "Oh, let's do something with this," is that actually, yeah, in the sense that the cleanliness and the sort of completeness of it actually does matter, because you then start to do things where your focus is not about everything disappearing to a dot in the middle of the screen because there's a big hole you didn't know about in the data, not in the programming. And also, I think because it gives us such a good bulwark to raise exactly the point that Peter made, which is, well, why is there so little of this? And via visual meta, I think will help, because if nothing else, what it ought to do once that, and even if other things like it are made, is they should start to just flush out the pipes, so the general quality of the data, whether consumed, read on the page, or provide as linked data in some semantic web system, it matters not. But the point is that the canonical reference of the data is actually for once correct and available. But that's quite a long-term thing. I think the spark for me today is just listening you talk about this idea you referred to, and well, how do I as the author find all the places I'm referring to something and make it usable to somebody else in a good form, because it's sort of it's this difference between following links that have been created by me or somebody else and actually creating them. Because it's one thing to imagine that this might link to that, but unless you know where that is and what it is, it's only a concept up to that point. So I mean, it was very telling in a way that Ted's early demos were copies of the Gutenberg Bible or the Gettysburg Address or something. That's not very challenging as a data set, I would say, because we know that. I mean, it's interesting what was doing, but you sort of said, yeah, but if I give you my last 10 years of email, how does that work? And the answer was with great difficulty. So we haven't quite, I'm sort of keep finding myself thinking ways that we can move that on. One thing also that came out of doing the microcosm demo for Adhuman, which made me realize I need to somehow find some, I need to get someone to pay me to do some research, to actually spend a lot more time in that system, because there in the early 90s is a lot of the things we're talking about. But there they had this concept, I can't remember what they called it, but it was like a trail, and you could follow the trail, but you could step off at any time. And if you wanted, you just click the button again and bounce, you were back where you left it. Now, think of that as a way of consuming your document. And going back to your very opening comment, so there's you as in Fred, about the horrible straitjacket that you find yourself in doing this writing. And I've certainly been through that same channel recently. I would love to have been able to write a sort of large and multi-threaded document in a way that I could have basically led people on different paths through it. Because actually, you can reach more outcomes. The sadness, in a way, of these long big things is you get to the answer 42 at the end, which is not always exciting. But often it's the tangential things that are more exciting.
In that case, what I would suggest, and this is my passion as well, is in Author you can already do these defined terms, as you guys have seen a billion times. They are output in a structured way. We could also always do more structured way. But Adam, if you want to work in your hypertextual multi-layout environment with boxes that are glossary terms that connect similar to do with our mapping, I think just by doing something very similar, we can discover something very different and find very different approaches, and then see how information can go back and forth. Because I honestly want to be able to have one presentation of my thesis be a paragraph or a page that says, this is what I'm trying to say. But then behind that, all the richness through connected concepts. This is very close to what you are passionate about too, isn't it, Adam?
Yeah, it is. My journey here has been, I was very hypertexty back in the days, but earlier on, and I found the first hypertext on an Amiga a long time ago, the Amiga Guide, which was a basic hypertext in the late 80s, early 90s, I think. But this time, after many hypertext things, I really wanted to do something more graphical. because I think it was underexplored. The web was mostly hypertexty, but everything was thrown away. At every click, you threw away everything you have seen before, and that's cool. But it's also very hard on the brain to leave all. So now I started doing a very graphical thing, but the hypertext has slowly crept back into my system. I want to do as little hypertext as transclusion, but not as much hypertext where you. But it has become a more and more of a hypertext thing again. So that has led me to the conclusion that I need some sort of hypertextual wrapper for my spaces, that you can navigate into them, but not so much that they are broken by being too hypertextual in themselves. If you get my point here, that you navigate into a kind of a space where you can put things, but they should be slightly more. Yeah, things should stay in place there.
If you need
Um,
more pre-calculated data, do just tell me.
Yeah, but okay. So what I was going to come to was that there is something about that column layout that I showed a couple of times ago, where you navigate from your library into the pages into a book, and from that you can continue on to a reference, a new PDF, and then you continue. Maybe using as we talked about today, using the width of the screen a bit more. So you navigate deeper and deeper by going left to right in this example. So you can scroll the text up and down to continue reading the text, but you can control the level or the deepness of your exploration by going left and right, scrolling left and right. If you get my point. If you saw the demo, you somewhat understand it, I guess.
Yeah. I do understand that. Let me
That is a wrapper for navigating in. So the idea is that if you have this system on your computer, for example, it could index all the PDFs or and other media, videos, and as well, and plain text. And then you could either watch it in the browser in a more limited way with the tools that I or we build, or you could quickly open up your favorite tool or favorite reader from that as well. So that would be a scope, something that I need myself, that could be also interact with. It can open up Author for writing more on a paper. It could open Reader if we want to read, or perhaps Raphael systems, or and if I see something Peter has done, maybe it can open that system as well, and my spaces. So that would be a kind of a library wrapper around everything we do here.
That's very interesting. And before Peter, I see you have your hand up. Of course, it could also work from you're in Reader, you read a glossary term, and you click a thing, and it opens in your view because it takes all that
Exactly.
with it.
Yeah.
Should we just this week, guys, try to meet every single day to actually make progress on something?
Well, I'm off away tomorrow, or I'm packing late tomorrow, and then I'm really off the grid until 23rd. I'm back this month, inconveniently.
23rd, okay.
I mean, I'll be picking up email, but I don't know how spotty the Wi-Fi will be. I'm going to be
maybe we design like a design week after that, or we think about things before, because I mean, okay, Adam, can you, because I also have to go and Peter has to speak, of course. Can you maybe come back tomorrow, maybe early enough for Mark to be there to do that demo again? Or can you do a recorded version of that demo? Because I remember it, but I'd like to know more about it.
I can try to do maybe I do a recording there, so we can keep it and refer to it.
Yeah, that sounds really good, recording it.
Yeah, I would really like that.
Because sometimes things are kind of lost in the discussion here. If
You
we want to
don't
refer
say.
to something. No, but it's long discussions, sometimes even hitting 2 hours almost. So it could be good to just. You are very good at doing short YouTube videos, Frode. So it's and it's very useful to watch it beforehand and then think about it and then discuss it.
Thank you for saying that, Adam, because I just realized that part of what we're talking about is video too. Instead of doing everything in a long session, yes, we can do a demo here, have a link to it, share it, and so on. Okay, great. We look forward to that, Adam. Peter?
I can't promise that I do it tomorrow, but I will do it as soon as I can this weekend. You'll have something, and then we can. I'm all for meeting up and doing an off the record meeting or something, and just a call and discuss it to prepare something that we can show on the next office hour or in a week or two.
I'm available most of the time. I'm here to be with my mother for reasons. Unless I have a meeting or I'm with her, I'm extremely happy to meet with you guys at any time. Okay. Peter?
Yeah, I think that the folding functionality in authors and readers is most exciting to me. If we could have that combined with filtering, imagine it's like sort of like fold and just show me paragraphs that have glossary definitions in them, or fold to show me section titles that contain computer source code excerpts. So some sort of a little language, maybe just like a couple little buttons in a palette that would allow us to have a semantic fold as opposed to just folding down through levels. So I might try to play with that in my experimentation.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. All right. This was nice. Very, very nice. We are now 2 minutes before being 15 minutes over. So have a relatively relaxing trip, Mark. I'm sure you'll miss the grid in a day. And we'll continue the dialogue as we can.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll be watching emails, especially for Peter and Adam. Seriously, if there's anything in the data sets that hopefully you'll get later tonight, do let me know. And because I'll have my laptop with me and I can.
Yeah, but we can let you wander in the wilderness for a week without thinking about data sets.
Oh, let me close with the pop culture reference. In case you haven't seen it yet, there's a trailer for the new Matrix movie out, and one of the things it depicts is Neo in an elevator, and everyone has their little PDAs and tablets out, and they're all staring at their screens except for him. It's a hilarious little clip, but it's an interesting commentary on how society has changed from the original trilogy.
Peter, we discussed it last meeting because the last character you meet in the trailer also plays the king in Hamilton, so we're all over it.
Very good. Have a great week, guys. See you Friday.
Bye.
Take care.